Wei Wuxian had only just opened his eyes when someone a voice thundered in his ears, playing dead. He almost coughed up blood. His head hit the ground, and with his face turned up, he saw Paisley and he thought he might have been the quick news of Paisley. Wei Wuxian had already lost count of the number of years it had been since he last heard a rascal speak. Never mind such awful auto. He was busy in the cracked voice of a young man with adrenaline between his teeth. Think for a moment who's laying the living on, who's masturbating, and who's minding his business. So what if I took a few things, anyways? They should have been mine in the first place. Soon after, there was the clamoring noise of chests and cabinets alike being ransacked. It was a good moment before Wei Wuxian's eyes became open. A dim feeling came into view as an unfortunate looking face with a beady gray. That face was spraying spittle all over him. And you dare go tattle on me? You think I'm actually afraid of you tattling? Do you actually think anyone in this house would take your side? Two large men who looked like servants came over. Young master, everything's smashed. So fast, the quaking youth questioned. There wasn't much stuff in this broken shack anyway, the servant replied. The quaking youth was extremely pleased. He turned to Wei Wuxian, pointing so hard at the man that he was practically jabbing his finger up his nose and into his brain. Go and tell on me, I dare you. Who are you playing dead for? As if anyone would actually give a crap about all this junk and waste paper. I've smashed everything. Let's see what else you've got to go tattle on me with. Think you're all that just because you went to a cultivation sect for a few years? Well, didn't you get kicked out like a stray dog anyway? Presently half dead, Wei Wuxian thought to himself, let's not pretend. I've actually been dead for many years. Who was this? Where was this? When had he ever done something like forcefully possess the body of another? After having kicked the man, ransacked the house, and spent all his temper, the quacking youth strutted out of the door along with his two servants, slamming the door behind him. He ordered in a loud voice, keep proper watch. Don't let him come out to embarrass people. The servants outside the door all heeded. Once the man had gone, silence settled both inside and out of the house. Wei Wuxian wanted to sit up, but his limbs would not obey him. So he lay back down and flipped over. His head continued to spin as he looked at his strange surroundings and the mess on the floor. Next to him was a copper mirror that had been tossed on the ground, and Wei Wuxian snapped it up. A dreadfully pale face appeared in the mirror. The two large blots of red were smeared evenly on each cheek. If he were to stick out a long and vivid red tongue, then he'd be the very picture of a hanged ghost. Wei Wuxian tossed the mirror aside, a little disgusted. He wiped his face and found his hands smeared with white powder. Fortunately, it wasn't that this body had been born strange, but rather the penchant of the previous owner. A full-grown man with a face fully caked in makeup, and sloppily applied at that. This shocked some energy back into Wei Wuxian, who was finally able to sit up. Only then did he notice the circle of a spell array beneath him. The array was scarlet and crooked, seemingly hand-drawn, using blood as the medium. It was still damp, emitting a metallic stench. There were warped and crazed spells drawn within the array that had been somewhat smudged by his body, but the remaining shapes and characters were gruesome in their evil intent. Wei Wuxian had been called by titles such as the Supreme Evil Lord, the Grandmaster of demonic cultivation, and whatnot for years, so naturally he was very familiar with obviously devious arrays such as these. It wasn't that he had robbed anyone of their body, he had been offered one. The nature of this sacrificial ritual was a type of curse. The caster was to harm themselves with a weapon, making cuts on their body and using their own blood to draw their array and write the spells within. They would then sit in the center of the circle and give up their mortal body to evil spirits, using the annihilation of their soul as the price to summon a nefarious, malicious ghost. This was all done in order to request the fulfillment of a wish, thus it was the opposite of possession. While both were forbidden magics of ill repute, the difference was that the former was much less popular than the latter. After all, few wishes were so strongly desired as to make someone willingly sacrifice everything they had. This was why the technique had been nearly lost after centuries of disuse. The examples recorded in ancient books had only a handful of cases that were backed by reliable evidence, and every single one of them had been for revenge. Every malicious ghost summoned by the ritual had fulfilled the caster's wishes perfectly in cruel and bloody ways. Wei Wuxian refused to accept this. Since when was he categorized as a nefarious, malicious ghost? While he had a fairly poor reputation and died an extremely tragic death, he didn't haunt the living for one, and he never sought vengeance for two. He could swear there was not a single wandering ghost in the world who was more decent and honest than he. But the tough thing was the sacrificial ritual followed the will of the caster first and foremost. So it didn't matter how much he objected. He was already inside this body, which was a silent acknowledgement that both parties had formed a contract. He had to fulfill the wish of the caster, or the curse would rebound, destroying the possessor's primordial soul and extinguishing it forever. Wei Wuxian yanked his sash loose and raised his arms to inspect them. Sure enough, both of his wrists had been slashed with a sharp tool, leaving them covered in crisscrossing lacerations. The bleeding had already stopped, but Wei Wuxian knew these were not normal injuries. If he didn't fulfill the caster's wish, then these wounds would be unable to heal, and they would worsen the longer this dragged on. If the deadline for fulfillment was met, then he who had accepted this vessel would be ripped apart in both body and soul alike. He triple-checked that there was no mistake and cried, "This is ridiculous," mentally 10 times before finally raising to his feet with difficulty, supporting himself against the wall. This house certainly was big, but it was empty and shabby. The bedding was emitting a sour smell. Who knew how many days had gone by since it was last changed? There was a bamboo basket for trash in the corner that had been kicked over earlier, and both trash and waste paper were strewn across the floor. Wei Wuxian noticed there seemed to be ink marks on the crumpled paper, so he picked up one in passing. He opened it to take a look, and sure enough, it was covered in words. He quickly went around to collect all the balls of paper. These were probably written by the owner of this body to vent his frustrations. Some of the sentences were incoherent and disordered, but the anxiety and nervousness were abundantly clear. Wei Wuxian patiently examined each sheet, and the more he looked, the more he felt something was amiss. Through some guesswork, he figured out a few things. First, the owner of this body was named Mo Shanyu, and this place was called the Mo Estate. Mo Shanyu's grandfather on his mother's side was from a rich family in this area. The family wasn't large, and the man was not fated for a son. After years of trying, he only had 2 daughters. The name of the second daughter wasn't mentioned, but either way, the eldest daughter was born of the lawful wife. Thus, they were looking for a husband to marry into their family name. Although the second daughter was exceptional in appearance, she was born of a servant, which was why the Mo family had originally planned to marry her out without giving much thought to the groom. Who would have thought she was fated for a fortuitous encounter? When she was 16, the head of a prominent clan was passing by and fell in love with her at first sight. The two made the Mo Manor the site of their rendezvous, and a year later, the second daughter gave birth to a son. This was Mo Shanyu. The inhabitants of the Mo estate would normally have held such an event in contempt, but people at the time worshipped cultivators. In the eyes of the mundane folk, cultivation clans that pursued immortality were loved by the heavens, mysterious and noble. Furthermore, that prominent clan leader would financially support this new outer family branch of his every so often, so naturally these circumstances were special. Not only did the Mo family consider this an honor, but others were extremely envious too. However, the good days did not last. That wandering clan leader was only hungry for the novelty of fresh meat, and he was over it after 2 years, coming to visit less and less frequently. After Mo Shan-yu turned 4, the man never appeared again. In those passing years, the Mo estate's opinion changed again. The contempt and mockery returned, now with added disdain and pity. Second Lady Mo refused to accept this, believing firmly that the prominent clan leader would not turn a blind eye to his own son. And sure enough, when Mo Shan-yu turned 14, that clan leader sent over a grand party to officially take him back. Second Lady Mo's head was held high again. Although she could not go with them, this event swept away all the grievances she had. Feeling proud and elevated, she proclaimed proudly to everyone she saw that her son will definitely become a leader of cultivation sects in the future, rise to the top and bring glory to the ancestors. Thus, the people of the Mo estate changed their opinion for the third time. However, Mo Shan-yu was driven out before he managed to cultivate a claim and succeed his father, and driven out in the most shameful way. Mo Shan-yu was a cut sleeve, a male homosexual, and he was so audacious as to harass his fellow peers. With this scandal exposed and the fact that he possessed only average talent and no real achievements in cultivation, the sect had no reason to keep him. Adding frost to snow, something had upset Mo Shan-yu. When he returned home, it was as a madman. His mental state had been upended, as if he had been scared silly. Having read to this point, Wei Wuxian's brow twitched a couple times. The cut sleeve matter aside, the man was a lunatic too. No wonder he had smeared enough powder on his face to look like a hand ghost. No wonder no one thought it strange that there was such a large bloody spell array on the ground. Mo Shan-yu could probably smear blood all over this house, from the floors, tiles, up the walls, and to the ceiling, and no one would think it weird because everyone knew he was crazy. After Mo Shan-yu returned to his old home, he was bombarded with ridicule. This time it seemed the situation was unsalvageable. Unable to take this blow, Second Lady Mo was choked to death by her own unappeasable outrage. At this time, Mo Shan-yu's grandfather had already passed, and the one managing the household was First Lady Mo. This Madame Mo had never been able to stand her little sister, and she scorned that sister's bastard son. She had a single son herself by the name of Mo Jinyuan, the one who had just ransacked Mo Shan-yu's house. When Mo Shan-yu first left with such an oppressive fanfare, First Lady Mo had felt they now possessed something of a family tie to that prominent cultivation sect, and had hoped the cultivator envoys would bring Mo Jinyuan along with them, too. Of course, she had been rejected, or rather ignored. Duh, this wasn't like selling cabbage in the markets, buy one get one free. Who knew where this family got its confidence, but they all possessed a bizarre idea. They firmly believed that Mo Jinyuan had a potential, that he had talent, and that if he were the one who had gone with the cultivators, then he would have been recognized for his worth for sure, unlike his failure of a cousin. Although Mo Jinyuan had been young when Mo Shan-yu left, he had been repeatedly indoctrinated to believe this nonsense without a single doubt. Thus he caught Mo Shan-yu every other day to humiliate him, cursing him for having robbed him of his path to cultivation. Yet he remained enamored with the talismans, the pills, and the little spiritual devices that had been brought back from the cultivation sect, and would take them all for himself, breaking them as he willed. While Mo Shan-yu was often in the throes of madness, he knew when he was being humiliated. He tried his best to endure it time and time again, but Mo Jinyuan's behavior only worsened, practically emptying the entire house. At last Mo Shan-yu had enough. He finally stammered a complaint to his uncle and aunt, which was why Mo Yuan had come knocking today looking for trouble. The words on the paper were tiny and cramped. Wei Wuxian's eyes were sore from reading all of this, and he thought to himself, what kind of hellish life was he fucking living? No wonder Mo Xianyu had preferred to end it, offering his body to summon malicious ghosts to avenge himself. After his eyeball started feeling better, it became his head's turned to ache. Technically, the caster of the array had to mentally recite their wish, as the evil spirit summoned Wei Wuxian should have been able to hear the details of his request. However, this forbidden magic had probably been secretly copied off a book with missing pages. It was incomplete, and Mo Xianyu had missed that step. Although Wei Wuxian could guess that he most likely sought vengeance against the Mo family. How exactly did he want it done? To what extent? Take back what was taken, beat up the family, or wipe them out entirely? It was most likely wiping out the family, After all, anyone who had been in the cultivation world would know the words most often used to describe Wei Wuxian, treacherous mad. Was there anyone who better fit the description of fiendish? Since the man had dared to summon him by name, his wish was definitely not something easily granted. Wei Wuxian said helplessly, but you got the wrong person. At first, he wanted to wash his face and gaze with reverence upon the dead countenance that had once belonged to its former owner. However, there was no water inside this house, not even drinking water. What's more, Wei Wuxian figured the only container around was for lavatory purposes and not for washing up. He tried pushing the door, but it was barred from the outside, probably to prevent him from running amok. There was not a single thing that could allow him the slightest bit of joy in being reincarnated. He might as well meditate for a while and get used to the new body. An entire day passed this way. When he opened his eyes once more, there was sunlight seeping into the house through the cracks of the window. Although he could get up and walk, his head was still spinning and it didn't appear to be getting better. Wei Wuxian was puzzled. This Mo Xianyu's cultivated spiritual power is so minuscule. It might be completely overlooked. There's no reason why I can't manipulate this body, so why is it so difficult to use? It wasn't until a strange noise sounded from his stomach that he realized it. It had nothing to do with the spiritual power. It was simply that this body, not trained for fasting, was hungry. If he delayed seeking food any longer, he might just become the first malicious ghost in history to die of hunger immediately after being summoned. Wei Wuxian took a deep breath and raised his foot. But just as he was about to kick the door open, there was suddenly the sound of footfalls on the other side drawing near. Someone gave the door a kick, which was followed by an annoyed call. Mealtime. While those were the words, it didn't appear the door was going to open at all. Wei Wuxian looked down just in time to see a small bowl be heavily set down before a small slat at the bottom of the door. The servant outside then added, "Hurry up, what's the holdup? Put the bowl out when you're done." The slat was smaller than a dog flap, not large enough to allow people to go in and out, but bowls could be passed through. There were two dishes and one bowl of rice that looked awfully disgusting. Wei Wuxian bitterly stirred the chopsticks that were stabbed into the rice. The Yangling patriarch had returned to life only to be kicked down and yelled at. The first meal to welcome him back was cold leftovers. Who would believe him if he told them what had happened to his bloody reign, his absolute massacres, his unadulterated annihilation of the sex? Truly, out of the mountains, a tiger can be bullied by a dog. In shallow waters, a dragon can be mocked by a shrimp, and a plucked phoenix is lower than a chicken. Stripped of their privileges, the strong will be belittled by the weak. Just then, the voice of the servant outside the door was heard once more, but this time it was a laugh that sounded as if it came from a completely different person. "Ading, come over here." A delicate and frail feminine voice answered from a distance. "Atang, did you come to deliver food for that person in there again?" Atang clicked his tongue. Why else would I come to this miserable courtyard? Ading's voice was at the door, much closer now. only make deliveries once a day, and no one scolds you even if you slack off every now and then. So why are you frowning at being so free? Look at me, so busy with errands that I can't even go out to play. Tung complained, it's not like delivering meals is the only thing I do. And you still dare go out right now? There are so many walking corpses roaming around that every household has their doors firmly shut. Wei Wuxian was crouched down by the door, pushing around the contents of the bowl in his hand with 2 chopsticks of different lengths, listening as he ate. It seemed like things hadn't been peaceful here at the Mo estate. Walking corpses, as per their name, were the walking dead, reanimated corpses that were low level and commonplace. Their eyes were usually glazed, their movements sluggish. They were fairly harmless, nonetheless. That was enough to terrify average folks, and their putrid smell alone was enough to make one fill a pot with puke. However, to Wei Wuxian, they were the easiest to manipulate and the most obedient of puppets. In fact, it even felt somewhat endearing to suddenly hear about them. Tung appeared to have winked. You have to take me along if you want to go out, so I could protect you. Ding cut him off dismissively. You protect me? Please, can you actually fight those creatures off? If I can't fight them off, then no one can, Tung grumbled. Ding laughed. How do you know if other people can't fight them off? Let me tell you. Delegates from a cultivation sect have already arrived at our Mo Manor today. I hear they're from an incredibly prominent clan. The madam is receiving them in the main hall right this minute. Everyone in town has gathered to watch. They're all so curious. You hear that noise? They might order me around again in a bit. I don't have time to play with you. Wei Wuxian listened intently. Sure enough, there was the faint sound of commotion. After a moment's contemplation, he got up and kicked the bar, locking the door, which broke with a crack. The 2 servants, flirting with each other, screamed in surprise when the door was suddenly flung open. Wei Wuxian tossed the bowl and chopsticks aside as he stalked out, but the sunlight blinded him. The glare was causing a small pinching pain on his skin, so he raised his hand to his brow and closed his eyes for a moment. Tung had screamed louder than Ding a moment ago, but when he looked closer, he realized it was that lunatic everyone could bully. His courage returned. Feeling he must regain the dignity he just lost, he jumped over and waved, shooing Wei Wuxian like one would a dog. He yelled, "Get out of here, shoo! Go back in! What are you doing outside?" Not even beggars or flies could have received more unsightly treatment. This was probably how these servants had treated Mo Shanyu in the past, and they grew more impertinent when he didn't retaliate. Wei Wuxian gave Tung a light kick, sending him tumbling and laughed. Who are you trying to humiliate, huh? With that, he headed east, following the noise. Both the East Hall and the East Courtyard were crowded with people, and just as Wei Wuxian stepped into the yard, he heard a woman whose voice rose louder than the others. We have a junior at home who also had an affinity for cultivation once. That must have been Madame Mo, who was trying to build connections with cultivation clans again. Wei Wuxian didn't bother waiting for her to finish before he languidly squeezed through the crowd, entering the main hall. He waved enthusiastically. Here, here, over here! In the main seat of the hall sat a middle-aged woman, well-maintained and scrupulously dressed. This was Madame Mo. The one sitting below was her husband, who had married into the family, and across from him were several white-clad youths with swords on their backs. When a disheveled, unkempt weirdo suddenly emerged from the crowd, conversation came to an abrupt stop. However, Wei Wuxian seemed to have no notice of the frozen atmosphere. He said unabashedly, "Who called me just now? The one with an affinity for cultivation. Isn't that me?" There was too much powder on his face, and it cracked when he smiled, flaking as it fluttered off. One of the white-clad youths snorted, almost laughing out loud, but he restrained himself when another youth, who appeared to be the leader of the bunch, shot him a disapproving look. Wei Wuxian snuck a glimpse at them and was somewhat taken aback. At first, he had thought an incredibly prominent clan, was but the exaggerated praises of an unlearned servant, but the people here really were cultivation disciples worth their name. Who would have thought? Gracefully sleeved with light, airily sashed, these youths were exceptionally pleasing to the eyes, transcendent and poised. Judging by their uniforms alone, it was obvious they came from the land clan of Guso. They were disciples with blood ties to the Lan family as well. Every single one of them had a 2-centimeter wide white ribbon patterned with rolling clouds tied around their foreheads. Elegance and righteousness was the model of the Lan clan of Gusu, and this forehead ribbon symbolized self-restraint. The rolling clouds were the Lan family's insignia, and guest cultivators or sect disciples of outside families affiliated with the prominent clan were only allowed to wear ribbons without the pattern. Wei Wuxian always cringed every time he spotted someone from the Lan family. He often complained under his breath in his previous life that their uniforms looked like funeral clothes, so he knew he wasn't mistaken now. It had been a long time since Madame Mo had seen this nephew of hers, and it took a while before she was able to recover from her shock. After realizing who this heavily powdered person was, she was furious, but she couldn't lose her composure, so she hissed at her husband. "Who let him out? Get him out of here." Her husband responded with an unapologetic smile and got up with a glum look, ready to seize Wei Wuxian. All of a sudden, Wei Wuxian dropped down without warning and latched firmly onto the ground, immovable no matter how he was pulled or dragged. Not even the servants who were called to help could do anything. If not for the outsiders who were present, they would have started to kick him already. Madame Mo's face was growing darker and darker, and the husband was drenched in sweat as well. He yelled, "You damn lunatic, if you don't go back right now, be careful or I'll put you in your place." Although everyone from the Mo estate knew there was a young master in the Mo family who had gone mad, Mo Jianyu had withdrawn into that gloomy house of his for many years, afraid to see anyone. Now that they saw how both his appearance and his action resembled those of a raging monster, they started to whisper among themselves, excited to watch the spectacle unfold. Wei Wuxian spoke up. "I could go back if you want." He pointed at Mo Xianyuan, "But you have to make him return everything he stole from me first." Mo Xianyuan never thought this lunatic would have the gall. He taught the guy a lesson just a day ago, only to have him turn around and expose him here today. His face changed colors as he exclaimed, "You're lying. Since when have I ever stolen anything of yours? Why would I need to steal any of your stuff?" Right, Wei Wuxian agreed. "You didn't steal, you snatched." Madame Mo could now tell that Mo Jianyu had obviously came prepared. His mind was perfectly clear, and he was bent on humiliating them. Shocked and livid, she accused him sharply. "You fully intend to wreak havoc here today, isn't that right?" Wei Wuxian looked confused. "He stole my stuff, snatched it from me, even is asking for it all back considered wreaking havoc?" Mo Xianyuan grew agitated, raising his leg to kick Wei Wuxian before Madame Mo could answer. However, one of the sword-carrying, white-clad youths moved his finger slightly, and Mo Xianyuan immediately lost his balance. The kick brushed past Wei Wuxian, missing the mark, and the boy tripped over himself. However, Wei Wuxian still tumbled and rolled as if he really had been kicked. He even ripped open his robes, revealing on his chest the footprint left behind by Mo Xianyuan's kicks the day before. The villagers of the Mo estate were enjoying the show immensely. Excitement filled the crowd. There was no way Mo Jianyu could have kicked himself to create that footprint, and no matter what, he was still a member of the Mo family. What a vicious household. The boy hadn't been this crazy when he first returned, so it was probably the family's doing. Either way, it wasn't like they were the ones being beaten, so as long as there was a show to watch, all the better. This spectacle was truly more interesting than the arrival of the cultivators. With so many eyes watching, the youth couldn't be beaten, and he couldn't be kicked out. Madame Mo had no choice but to forcefully smooth the whole debacle over with fury thick in her throat. She said impassively, "What, steal? What, snatch? Such ugly accusations. We are family. It's nothing but borrowing. All you on is your younger brother. So what if he takes a few things of yours? As an elder brother, will you be the stingy throwing a childish tantrum and embarrassing everyone over such a small matter? It's not like he wasn't going to return your things." The white-clad youths stared at each other in dismay. One of them almost choked on his tea. The disciples who grew up with the long clan of Gusu were raised in refined elegance, so they had probably never encountered such a farce, nor heard such brilliance. Today's events were probably widening their horizons. Wei Wuxian laughed maniacally in his mind and extended his hand. "Give them back then." Of course, Mo Xinyuan couldn't return anything. All the items were long since tossed out or torn apart, and even if he could have returned them, he wouldn't have done so willingly. Red in the face, he cried out in protest, "Mom!" He scowled at her. "Are you going to let him insult me like this?" Madame Mo glowered at him, signaling him not to make the scene any worse than it was. Unexpectedly, Wei Wuxian spoke up again. "While we're on the topic, not only should he not have stolen my stuff, he shouldn't have done so in the middle of the night. Everyone knows I like men. Even if he has no shame, I know not to make myself suspicious." Madame Mo drew in a sharp breath and yelled, "What are you spewing in front of the village folks? How shameless! All Yuan is your little cousin." When it came to outrageous behavior, Wei Wuxian was an expert. And the best, he had to maintain some form of decorum so people couldn't accuse him of having a poor upbringing. But now he was a lunatic anyway, so what did he care for his shame? He could go wild and cut loose to his heart's content. He stiffened his neck and said outright, he knew he was my little cousin, but he still didn't observe propriety and keep his distance. So who is the more shameless one here? I don't care if you don't care about your reputation, but I still care about mine. I still gotta find a good man. Mo Xinyuan roared, chasing a chair to hurl it Wei Wuxian's way. Seeing that he'd finally snapped, Wei Wuxian quickly scrambled up to go hide. The chair broke into pieces upon impact on the ground. The spectators crowding in and out of the East Hall were waiting with unconcealed delight to watch the Mo family be disgraced, but they all quickly dispersed once things got violent, afraid they might be injured. Wei Wuxian ducked towards the youths from the Lan family, who were completely dumbfounded by what was unfolding, crying as he did so, you see, he's hitting me even though he stole my stuff. How heartless." Mo Xinyuan chased over, ready to lunge, but the leader of the youth stopped him. "This Gong Zai, we could talk this out." Seeing that the youth intended to protect the lunatic, Madame Mo grew apprehensive. She forced a smile. "This young man is my younger sister's son. He's a little, unstable here. Everyone at the Mo estate knows he's crazy. He's always saying strange things, so don't take him seriously, esteemed cultivators. You mustn't." Before she could finish, Wei Wuxian poked his head out from behind the youth. "Who said I can't be taken seriously? From now on, if anyone tries to steal my stuff, I'm going to chop off an arm for every time they do. Just try me." Mo Xinyuan was being held back by his father at first, but when he heard this, his anger flared up again. Wei Wuxian darted out the door like a fish, taunting him with a la 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 as he went. The youth quickly blocked the door right after and changed the topic, assuming a serious face to talk business. Then we will be borrowing your esteemed West Courtyard for tonight. Please remember exactly what I said earlier. Lock all doors and shut all windows tight after dusk. Do not come out for any activities, especially not near the West Courtyard." Madame Mo was shaking with rage, but it wouldn't have been courteous to push the youth aside. Despite him blocking her, she could only reply, "Yes, yes, thank you, thank you." Mo Xinyuan was in a state of disbelief. "Mom, are you going to let that lunatic get away with slandering me in the public? Did you see? He's only up here. Shut your mouth. Madam Mo cut him off sharply. Can you wait until we're back inside? Mon Yuan had never suffered such a wrong before, nor had he ever been humiliated this way. He had especially never been scolded by his mother like this. He cried furiously, "That lunatic is dead." After Wei Wuxian had was done letting loose, he went out the main entrance of the manor and strolled around the Mo estate to show his face, scaring in numerous passerbys and enjoying himself while he was at it. He began to understand the joy of being a madman and was even starting to be pleased with the hang of ghost makeup, not wanting to wash it off. It's not like there's water around anyway, so I'll let it be. He fixed his hair and glanced at his wrists. There were no indication the cuts were fading or healing at all, which meant the trifling revenge of venting anger on Mo Yuan's behalf was far from enough. Did he really have to slaughter the entire Mo family? To be honest, that wouldn't have been anything difficult to do. Wei Wuxian pondered this as he sauntered back to the Mo Manor. As he snuck past the west courtyard with small, quick steps, he noticed the land disciples on top of the rooftops and wall eaves, gathered in somber discussions. He snuck back again with those small, quick steps and looked up, watching them intently. While the Lan clan of Guso was a major part of the coalition that had come to besiege him in the past, those juniors hadn't been born yet at the time. Or if they had, they would have only been a few years old. So that event had nothing to do with them. Wei Wuxian stood there and observed, wanting to see how they planned on handling this situation. As he looked on, he suddenly felt something amiss. Why did those black flags being flown on the rooftops and wall eaves look so familiar? The flag was called a spirit attraction flag. If it was stuck on a living person, then it would attract every dark spirit, every vengeful ghost, every fierce corpse, and all such manner of evil to attack said person. Since wearing a flag was akin to becoming a living target, the flag was also called a target flag. It could also be stuck on buildings, but said building had to have living persons within, and the range of the target would increase to include all people within the building. Since a yin energy swirled around the area where these flags were planted like a black whirling wind, they were also known as black wind flags. Those youths were setting up the flag formation and had told others not to go near, so they had to attend to lure the walking corpses here to capture them all at once. As for why the flags looked familiar, how could they not? The creator of the spirit attraction flag was this very Yingling patriarch. It appeared that despite how the cultivation world had demanded Wei Wuxian's demise, they nevertheless had no qualms about making use of his inventions. One of the disciples on the rooftops noticed him watching and chided him, "Go back, this is not a place you should be." Though he was being ordered to shoot, it was done with good intentions, and the tone of voice employed was also greatly different from those of the Mo servants. While the youth was off his guard, Wei Wuxian hopped up and plucked a flag. Greatly alarmed, the disciple jumped down the wall to chase after him. "Don't touch that, it's not for you." Wei Wuxian hollered as he ran, looking completely like a lunatic, his hair flying loose and disheveled, and arms waving and legs skipping. "Finders keeper, I want this, mine!" The disciple quickly caught up with him and grabbed his arm. "Give it back, or else I'll hit you." Wei Wuxian clutched the flag tightly, refusing to let go. The leader of the group that was setting up the flag formation was alerted by the commotion and also came fluttering down from the eaves. "Jing Yi, let it go. Retrieve the flag nicely. There is no need to start a dispute." Shi Zui, "I didn't hit him for real," and Jing Yi complained. "Look at him. He messed up the flag formation." During their push and pull, Wei Wuxian had swiftly finished inspecting the spirit attraction flag. The drawn patterns were correct, and none of the spells were missing either. There were no mistakes, so no mishaps would occur if the flags were used. The only issue was that the person who had drawn the flag was not very experienced, so the spell could only attract any evil walking corpses within a 2.5 radius at most. But that would be enough. Lan Shizui turned to him with a smile. Moganzai, it is getting late and we will be starting to catch walking corpses here soon. It is dangerous at night. You best hurry back to your chambers. Wei Wuxian sized this youth up. The boy was gentle in disposition, refined and elegant, noble in his bearing, with a light grin curving the corners of his lips. This was a good sprout, very worthy of encouragement, and Wei Wuxian mentally gave him a nod of approval. The child had set up the flag formation in a proper and orderly manner, and his upbringing really was quite commendable as well. Wei Wuxian wondered who among that terrifying group full of uptight sticks in the mud known as the Long Clan had managed to raise such a junior. Lin Shizui added this flag. Before he could finish, Wei Wuxian tossed the spirit attraction flag on the ground and humphed. What's so good about this crappy flag? I could draw better. He then took off right after. The juniors who were on the rooftops watching the show burst out laughing at his shameless decoration so riotously that they almost fell off the roof. Lan Jigyi, who also laughed in exasperation, then picked up the flag on the ground, dusting it off. What a lunatic. Don't say that, Lan Shizui chided him. Let's go back and help now. As for Wei Wuxian, he wandered idly about for a while. It wasn't until after dark that he returned to Mo Shan-yu's little courtyard. The door latch was snapped without anyone to clean up the mess. He ignored it and picked a somewhat clean spot in the room before sitting down and continuing to meditate. Yet unexpectedly, it hadn't reached the morning hours when a noisy commotion outside pulled him out of his meditative state. A clamor of footsteps mixed with wailing and screaming was rapidly approaching, and Wei Wuxian heard these cries repeated. Break in and drag him out. Report him to the authorities. Who cares about the authorities? Just beat him to death. He opened his eyes just as a number of servants charged in. The entire courtyard was lit up as bright as day, and someone was shouting, "Drag that murdering lunatic to the main hall and make him pay with his life." Wei Wuxian's first thought was, did something go wrong with those use of flag formation? The smallest carelessness in the usage of his inventions could cause disaster, which was why he had earlier purposely gone to verify whether the spirit attraction flag was properly drawn. Thus, when those large hands came to drag him out the door, Wei Wuxian lay there limply, allowing himself to be dragged out. It saved him the trouble anyway. He was dragged to the East Hall, where it was as lively as can be. Surprisingly, there were no fewer townspeople gathered than there had been during the day. Many of the servants and close family relations had come, some still dressed in inner robes, not having had time to coif their hair, panic painted on each of their faces. Lady Mo sat slumped in her seat as if she had only just woken from having fainted. There were traces of tears on the side of her cheeks, the rims of her eyes still wet. However, the moment Wei Wuxian was dragged in, her tears instantly transformed into a baleful glare. On the ground there lay something that resembled the form of a human. The body was covered by a white sheet, and only its head was exposed. Lan Shizui and those youths were bent down over it, inspecting the body solemnly and whispering to each other. Their words filtered into Wei Wuxian's ears. It hasn't been one incense time since he was discovered. Right after subduing the walking corpses, we were rushing to the east courtyard, and the dead body was lying there in the corridor. This body was Mo Xinyuan. Wei Wuxian swept a glance over him, then took another look in spite of himself. This corpse looked exactly like Mo Xinyuan, but at the same time not. While the facial features were clearly that of his cheap little cousin, the cheeks were deeply sunken, the eyeballs bulging, and the skin wrinkled. It was as if he had aged 20 years compared to the previous Mo Xinyuan, who had been in the prime of his youth. It also almost seemed as if he had been sucked dry of his blood and flesh. He looked like a mere sack of bones dressed in an extremely thin veil of skin. If it could have been said that the Muzhen Yuan from before was simply ugly, then his corpse was now old and ugly. Wei Wuxian was just taking a detailed look when Madame Mo suddenly came charging over. Something shining flashed in her hand. She was holding a dagger, moving as fast as his eyes saw. Lan Shizui knocked it out of her hand, but before he could say anything, Madame Mo was already screaming at him. My son died a tragic death. I need to avenge him. What are you stopping me for? Wei Wuxian once again ducked behind Lan Shizui and shot back. What does your son's tragic death have to do with me? Lan Shizui had watched Wei Wuxian make a scene during the day, then later heard plenty of exaggerated rumors about this illegitimate son from the others. He felt great pity for this mentally ill person and couldn't help but try and speak up for the man. Madame Mo, the state of your son's corpse is clearly the work of evil. Its blood, the flesh, and spirit has been completely sucked out. He could not be the culprit. Madame Mo's chest heaved. What do you know? This lunatic's father is a cultivator, so he must have learned plenty of evil magic. Lan Shizui looked back and took a glance at the seemingly half-witted Wei Wuxian. Madam, there is no evidence, so it is still best. The evidence is on my son's body. Madame Mo pointed at the corpse on the ground. Take a look yourselves. Yuan's dead body has already told me who his murderer is. Without waiting for the others to make a move, Wei Wuxian raced to pull back the sheet from head to toe. Mo Yuan's corpse had something missing. His left arm, from the shoulder down, had vanished as if it had sprouted wings. Madame Mo added, You see that? You all heard him today, right? What that lunatic said? What if Yuan touched his things again, he would chop off Yuan's arm. After her hysterics had settled, she covered her face and sobbed. My poor Yuan never touched anything of this lunatic's. Not only was he slandered, he was killed by this maniac. It was so endearing. How many years had it been since he heard himself described as such? Wei Wuxian pointed at himself, but he didn't have the words to rebuke that particular statement. He didn't know either whether he really was mental or if Madame Mo was the one who was ill. After all, he had boasted about slaughtering entire sacks, laying waste to millions, making blood flow like rivers, and other such things when he was younger. But that was all talk most of the time. If he really could do all that, he would have tyrannized the world already. Madame Mo wasn't trying to avenge her son at all. She was only looking for someone to vent her anger on. Wei Wuxian didn't want to bother with her. After a moment of thought, he reached into Mo Yuan's robes and searched, finally digging something out. When he unfolded that something, it was the spirit attraction flag. In that instant, it dawned on him. He muttered under his breath, Mo Yuan brought this on himself. When Lan Shizui and the others saw the item taken out of Mo Yuan's robes, they also understood what had happened. Thinking back to the farce that had taken place during the day, it wasn't hard to deduce what had transpired. Earlier, Mo Yuan had lost considerable face due to Mo Yuan's hysterics, filling him with hatred. He had a mind to settle scores, but Mo Yuan had gone out frolicking, nowhere to be found. So Mo Yuan intended to wait until nighttime to teach Mo Yu an underhanded lesson. Yet when night came and he snuck out the door, as he passed by the west courtyard, he saw the spirit attraction flags planted atop the wall eaves. While there were strict instructions against outings at night, and that the west courtyard was forbidden, and that those black flags were not to be touched under any circumstances, Mo Yuan thought that was the cultivators purposely scaring people off because they were afraid of others stealing their precious spiritual weapons. He was unaware of just how dangerous and ominous the effects of the spirit attraction flags were, and that once held a flag would make the bearer a living target. Mo Xinyuan's hands had never been clean. He had grown addicted to stealing the talismans and spiritual tools belonging to his crazy older cousin. When he saw the magical tool, saw the magical objects, he couldn't help but feel the itch to take them for himself, no matter the cost. Thus, while the owners of the flags were subduing walking corpses in the west courtyard, he secretly plucked one away. The flag formation utilized 6 spirit attraction flags, 5 of which were set up on the west courtyard using those used from the Lan family as bait. However, they themselves were protected by the countless spiritual tools carried on their persons. Although Mo Zhenyu had only stolen the one flag, he didn't have any protective tools on him. Go after the weakest, as they say. Naturally, the evil spirits were lured to him. If it had only been walking corpses, then it wouldn't have been a big deal. At most, he would have been bitten a couple times. It wouldn't have resulted in his death. There would still have been a chance to save him. Yet, it just so happened that the spirit attraction flag had unintentionally summoned something more terrifying than walking corpses, and it was precisely that unknown evil spirit that had killed Mo Xinyuan and robbed him of his arm. Wei Wuxian raised his wrist. Sure enough, a cut on his left arm had healed. It seemed the sacrificial ritual had acknowledged Mo Xinyuan's death as his doing. After all, the spirit attraction flag was Wei Wuxian's invention, so he hit the mark out of pure luck. Madame Mo was perfectly aware of her son's little flaws, but she would never admit Mo Xinyuan had caused his own death. Anxious and aggravated, she picked up a teacup and hurled it at Wei Wuxian's face. If you hadn't made a scene and framed him in front of so many people yesterday, would he have gone out in the middle of the night? It's all your fault, you bastard. Wei Wuxian was already prepared and sidestepped to dodge the attack. Madame Mo then screamed at Lan Shizui, "And you bunch of useless fools! What cultivators are you? What evil can you exercise? You can't even protect a child. All you want is so young." The youths were still green and only had so much experience under their belt. They hadn't detected anything unusual in the area, which was why they never thought there'd be such a ferocious evil. At first, they had been quite sorry because they felt themselves lacking, but after Madame Mo indiscriminate tongue lashing, they were growing upset. After all, they came from a distinguished clan. No one had ever dared treat them this way. The teachings of the Lan clan Ogusu were extremely strict. They forbade raising a hand against normal folk, and not even rudeness was allowed. Even though they were irritated, they had to force it down, causing dark expressions to cloud their faces. Wei Wuxian couldn't take it anymore, he thought. After so many years, the Lan family still acts this way. What's the use of all the self-restraint unless you're looking to suffocate yourselves? Watch me. He spat loudly. Who do you think you're yelling at? Do you really take them to be your servants? They came all this way to exercise evil for free, and now they owe you. How old is your son again? At least 17, right? A child still? How old do you have to be to understand human words? Did they not instruct us again and again yesterday not to go near the west courtyard, not to touch anything in the formation? Your son snuck out in the middle of the night to dally about. Is that my fault, or is it his fault? Lan Jiggy and the others let out a breath, no longer looking as upset. Madame Mo was both extremely sad and resentful, and her mind was filled with nothing but the thoughts of death. More specifically, it wasn't thoughts of herself dying or to accompany her son, but rather thoughts of having everyone in this world die, especially the ones currently in front of her. Whenever something happened, she'd always order her husband around, and so she shoved him. Call everyone in here. However, her husband was in a daze. Perhaps the shock of the death of his only son was too great, but he shoved her back, knocked down to the ground so abruptly Madame Mo was stunned. It was, if this had been more before, Madame O needn't have pushed him. As long as she raised her voice a tiny bit, he'd do whatever she wanted. But yet, today he dared fight back. The servants were all terrified by her expression, and a trembling Aldine helped her stand. Madame O grabbed her heart and said with a shaking voice, You, get lost too. Her husband seemed not to have heard. Ding shot Ah Tong a number of looks, and Ah Tong quickly dragged his master out. It was chaos within the East Hall. Seeing how the family was finally quieting down, Wei Wuxian went to inspect the corpse further. However, he had barely glanced at it before another high-pitched scream pierced through the door. The crowd inside the hall poured out and were greeted with the sight of two bodies spasming on the ground in the east courtyard. One was a slumped Ah Tong alive, the other was collapsed on the ground, its body wrinkled and withered as if its blood and flesh had been completely sucked dry. Its left arm was already gone, and there was no blood flowing from the wound. The state of this corpse was exactly the same as Mo Xinyuan's. Madame Mo had just shaken off Ding's supporting hand, but when she saw that corpse lying on the ground, she was stunned in place. At last, exhausted of the energy to throw more fits, she fainted. Wei Wuxian happened to be standing near her, so he caught her and passed her to Ding as she came running over. He then took a glance at her right hand. A cut there was gone as well. Madame Mo's husband had only stepped out onto the threshold of the hall. He hadn't even entered the yard before he died tragically on the spot. Everything had happened within an instant. Lan Shizui, Lan Jingyi, and the others paled, but Lan Shizui was the first to compose himself. He questioned slumped Ah Tong. Did you see what it was? Ah Tong was thoroughly horrified, his teeth clenched so hard that he couldn't utter a word for the moment, only shaking his head. Lan Shizui, burning with impatience, instructed his peers to bring the boy inside before he turned to Lan Jingyi. Did you fire the signal? I did, Lan Jingyi replied, but if there are no seniors nearby who can come to offer assistance, our people will probably take at least an hour before they can make it here. What do? We don't even know what it is right now. It was, of course, impossible for them to leave. If a clan's disciples only cared about escape when running into evil spirits, then not only did they embarrass the clan, but they themselves would be too ashamed to go out again. The terrified folks of the Mo household could not leave with them either. The evil spirit was most likely among them, so it would have been useless even if they fled. Lan Shizui clenched his teeth. Stay on guard until help arrives. Since the distress signal was already fired, other cultivators would soon come to their aid. In order to avoid adding to the present trouble, by all accounts, Wei Wuxian should have retreated. Best if whoever came was no one he knew. If it was someone he had crossed paths with before or had fought with, then it was hard to tell what would happen. With the sacrificial rituals cursed on him, he could not leave the Mo estate yet. Besides, if the summoned creature could take 2 lives within such a short span of time, then it was abnormally ferocious. If Wei Wuxian dropped everything and left, then by the time reinforcements arrived, the entire Mo estate would have its streets filled with corpses missing their left arms, and surely some of those corpses would include the familial disciples of the Lan clan of Gusu. After a moment's deliberation, Wei Wuxian said to himself, let's end this quickly. Those youths were fledglings, each of them looking nervous. Despite that, they still scrupulously took their places to protect the Mo Manor and stuck talismans inside and outside of the hall. The servant Ah Tong had already been carried inside, and Lan Shizui checked his pulse with his left hand, while his right massaged Madame Mo's back. He couldn't treat both at once and was in a sorry dilemma when suddenly Ah Tong crawled up from the ground. Ding exclaimed, Ah Tong, you're awake! Before any delay could cross her face, Ah Tong raised his left hand and seized his own neck. Seeing this, Lan Shizui targeted several of Aotung's acupoints with a triple tap of his hand apiece. Wei Wuxian knew that while the Lan clan appeared gentle on the surface, their arm strength was not gentle in the least. Using that method, anyone would be rendered thoroughly unable to move. However, Aotung appeared not to have felt a thing. His left hand gripped harder and harder, his face scrunching more and more with pain. Lan Jiggy went over to pull at his left hand, but it was like trying to break off a chunk of iron, immovable. Moments later, crack, Aotung's head dropped down, and only then did the hand let go, but his neck was already broken. He had actually strangled himself before the eyes of all. Seeing this, Alding's voice trembled. A ghost! There's an invisible ghost here, and it made Aotung strangle himself. Her voice was shrill and sad, raising hairs on everyone's necks. They all believed her. Wei Wuxian determined to be the exact opposite, however. This wasn't a malicious ghost. He had seen the talismans the youths had chosen, and they were the spirit-repelling type. They had plastered the entire East Hall with them airtight. If this really was a malicious spirit, then those talismans would have immediately burned with green flames when it entered the East Hall. Things would not be as quiet as they were now. It wasn't that the group of youths were slow to react, it was that the intruder was truly ferocious in nature. The cultivation sects had a strict criteria for determining whether something was a malicious ghost. One was considered such if it killed once a month for up to 3 months consecutively. This was a criterion Wei Wuxian himself had set, and it was probably still in use now. Dealing with this type was his specialty, and based on what he had seen, killing once every 7 days would make this creature a malicious ghost that caused particularly frequent mischief. However, this thing had just killed 3 times in a row, and in a short time span too. Even accomplished cultivators would have been hard-pressed to come up with a counter-strategy, never mind these novice juniors. Just as he was thinking this, the firelight flashed. A blast of sinister wind whipped by, and every lantern and every candle in the entire courtyard, including the East Hall, was extinguished. Screams erupted the instant the lights went out. The men and women pushed and shoved, falling and fleeing. Lan Jingyi shouted, "Stay where you are, don't run, we'll arrest whoever runs." Those were not words spoken without reason. Wreaking havoc in the dark and taking advantage of confusion was the nature of evil spirits. The more the people scream and run amok, the easier it would be to attract trouble unknowingly. It was extremely dangerous to be left alone or to lose one's head at a time like this. And yet it could not be helped that everyone was scared out of their wits, so how could they possibly pay attention to and heed any instructions? It didn't take long before the East Hall fell quiet, with only the sound of light breaths and faint sniffing. Most had probably left. In the darkness, a firelight suddenly flared. It was Lan Shizui who had lit an illumination talisman. The flames of the illumination talisman could not be extinguished by the sinister wind that carried evil, and he used this talisman to relight the candles anew while the rest of the youths went around to console the others. Under the light, Wei Wuxian took a nonchalant glance at his wrist. Another cut had healed. It was then that he suddenly realized the number of cuts were wrong. There had been 2 cuts on his left wrist and 2 on his right. One cut healed after Mo Xinyuan's death, another cut healed after the death of Mo Xinyuan's father, and then a third after the death of the servant Aotong. Tallying that up, there should have been 3 healed cuts, leaving only the cut with the deepest wound and the deepest hatred. But now there was nothing on his wrist, not a single cut was left. Wei Wuxian trusted that Madame Mo was most definitely among those who Mo Zhenyu wished to seek revenge upon. The longest and the deepest gash was likely for her, yet it had surprisingly vanished. Was it Mo Zhenyu who had suddenly let it go and abandoned his hatred? That was impossible. His soul had been sacrificed as the price for summoning Wei Wuxian. In order for the cut to heal, Madame Mo had to die, unless He slowly moved his gaze from his wrist to Madame Mo, who had recently roused and was surrounded by the crowd. Her face was white as a sheet, unless she was already dead. Wei Wuxian was sure something had already possessed Madame Mo. If that thing was not a spirit, then what could it be? Suddenly, Ah Ding cried, "Hand, hand!" Ah Tung's left arm. Lan Shizui moved the illumination talisman over Ah Tung's corpse. Sure enough, his left arm had also vanished. The left arm. In that flash of a second, something was clear. The creature causing mischief and the vanishing left arms formed a connection that clicked in Wei Wuxian's mind. He suddenly snorted and burst out laughing. Jin Yi huffed, "That dummy! How can he laugh at a time like this?" But then he realized that given the man was a dummy, what was the point of bothering with him in the first place? However, Wei Wuxian grabbed Lan Jingyi's sleeve and shook his head. "No, no, no." Lan Jingyi irritably tried to pull his sleeve back. "No what? Not a dummy? Stop playing around. No one's got time for you." Wei Wuxian pointed at Father Mo's and Ah Tung's corpses on the ground. "That's not them." Lan Shizui stopped Lan Jingyi, who was about to blow up. He asked, "You said that's not them. What do you mean?" Wei Wuxian replied solemnly, "This isn't Mo Xinyuan's dad, and that's not Ah Tung either." With his face smeared with makeup, the more solemn he was, the more it felt like he really was mentally ill. However, under the haunting candlelight, his words were surprisingly hair-raising. Lan Shizui was stunned for a moment, then questioned him in spite of himself. "Why is that?" Wei Wuxian said smugly, "Because of the hand. They're not left-handed. They always beat me with their right hands. I know that much at least." Lan Jingyi lost his patience and spat. "What are you so smug for? Look at that pleased face." Lan Shizui, however, had broken out in a cold sweat from the shock. Thinking back, Ah Tung had strangled himself using his left hand. And then, when Madame Mo's husband pushed his wife down, he had also used his left hand. But during the day when Mo Yu had been causing a ruckus in the East Hall, those two had been busy trying to chase him out using their habitual right hands. Surely they couldn't both have turned into left-handers all of a sudden, right before their deaths. Although the cause was presently unknown, in order to investigate what was causing mischief, they had to start with those left arms. Having come to the conclusion, Lan Shizui sent a bewildered look at Wei Wuxian. Despite himself, he thought, for him to suddenly say something like that really doesn't seem like a coincidence. Wei Wuxian only continued to laugh cheekily, knowing that the hint had been too conspicuous, but there was no other way. Thankfully, Lan Shizui didn't dig into it, thinking either way, since this Mo Gongzai was willing to call attention to it for me, it most likely wasn't done out of ill intent. He moved his gaze from Wei Wuxian, swept over Ah Ding, who had fainted from weeping, and landed his eye on Madame Mo. His eyes traveling down from her face to her hands. Her arms were hanging by her sides, mostly hidden in the sleeves, revealing only the tips of her fingers. The fingers of her right hand were snow white and slim, truly the hand of a woman who lived in privilege without the hardship of labor. However, the fingers on her left hand were longer and thicker than those of the right. The knuckles were curled, filled with strength. How was that the hand of a woman? It was clearly the hand of a man. "Hold her down," Lan Shizui shouted. The youths had already twisted Madame Mo's arm back in a hold. With a "Forgive me," Lan Shizui pulled out a talisman. He was ready to slap it down with Madame Mo's left arm twisted at an impossible angle, aiming for his throat. The only way for a living human to twist their arm that way would be if their bones were broken. The hand's movement was fast, and it would have seized his neck had it not been for Lan Jingyi tackling Lan Shizui with a thudded loud "Gah!" and blocking the attack for him. There was a flash of firelight. That hand had only just grabbed Lan Jingyi's shoulder when green flames flared to life at the same spot. It instantly loosened its grip. Having escaped death, Lan Shizui was just about to thank Lan Jingyi for coming to his rescue when he saw that half of Lan Jingyi's uniform had been burned to ashes, making him look incredibly unkempt. Flustered and enraged, Lan Jingyi stripped off the unburnt half of his uniform as he looked back and yelled, "Why did you kick me, stupid lunatic? Did you want me to want me killed?" Wei Wuxian scurried away, hugging his head. "It wasn't me. It was most certainly he who had kicked Lan Jingyi." The outer robe of the Lan family's uniform was tightly embroidered with spells and incantation inside its lining to provide protection. However, the effect would have been nullified after one use when encountering a formidable foe such as this. Under these dire circumstances, Wei Wuxian could only give Lan Jingyi a kick to make him use his body to shield Lan Shizui's neck. Lan Jingyi was going to yell some more, but Madame Mo collapsed to the ground. The flesh and blood of her face had been drained so utterly that only a layer of skin pressed against her skull remained. The man's arm that did not belong to her fell off her left shoulder, yet its fingers could still move as it willed. It was as if it were stretching, the pulsing of its veins clearly visible. That thing was the evil that had been summoned by the spirit attraction flag. Dismemberment was a standard of violent death. It was a little more dignified than the way Wei Wuxian had died, though not by much. Unlike being crushed to ashes, the limbs of a dismembered corpse retained a part of the grudges of the deceased. One could yearn to return its body, yearn to die a complete One would yearn to return to its body, yearn to die a complete corpse. Thus, it would also attempt to seek out the other parts of its body. Once found, the corpse would then perhaps rest in peace and satisfaction, or perhaps wreak a greater havoc. If the rest of its original body wasn't found, however, a limb could only go for the second best option. What was the second best option? Seek What was the second best option? Seek out the bodies of living humans and make do, just as the left arm had demonstrated. Devour the left arm of the living, take its place, and suck out the living human's spirit, blood, and flesh. Then abandon the body to continue searching for the next host. This would continue until all parts of its original corpse were found. Once this arm attached itself to a body, it was instant death for the host. Though prior to their blood and flesh being completely eaten, the human could still move normally within the arm's control as if still alive. After the arm had been summoned, the first vessel it found was Mo Xin Yuan. The second vessel was Mo Xin Yuan's father. Then Madame Mo had told her husband to get lost. He acted out of character and pushed her. At first, Wei Wuxian had thought it was because the man was heartbroken because of his son's death, and that he had also had enough of his wife's unreasonable behavior. In retrospect, that had not been the demeanor of a father who had just lost a son. That had not been the stupor of despair. It had been stillness, the stillness of the dead. The third vessel was Ah Tung, and the fourth was Madame Mo. The left arm took advantage of the chaos when the lights went out earlier to migrate to her body, and when Madame Mo was killed, the last cut on Wei Wuxian's wrist had also vanished with her demise. Seeing how the talismans were useless but their clothes were not, all the lawn youths each stripped off their outer robes and threw them at the left arm, covering and wrapping it in layers upon layers of robes, like a thick white cocoon. A moment later, this ball of white clothes ignited with a whoosh, the wicked green flames blazing to the skies. Though it worked for the time being, it would not last long. Once the uniforms were completely burnt, the arm would break free from their ashes. While no one was paying attention, Wei Wuxian ran straight for the west courtyard. Over a dozen walking corpses these youths had captured were standing silently in the yard. A spell had been drawn upon the ground to seal them inside its boundary, and Wei Wuxian stopped on one of the characters, destroying the entire array. After two claps, the walking corpses jerked. Their white eyes opened abruptly as if they had been shocked awake by an explosion of thunder. "Wake up," Wei Wuxian said. "Time to get to work." He never needed any complicated spells or summoning incantation to control corpse puppets. The most straightforward command would suffice. The walking corpses at the very front quivered as they struggled to shuffle a few steps. Then the moment they approached Wei Wuxian, they fell face first to the ground like living humans, as if their legs had grown weak from terror. Not knowing whether to laugh or cry at this, Wei Wuxian clapped twice more, but much softer this time. However, these walking corpses had probably been born at the Mo estate and had died here as well. They've never seen the world, so while they instinctively obeyed the summoner's command, they were also terrified of the summoner for some reason, lying on the ground, whimpering, too afraid to get up. The crueler the evil spirit, the easier it was for Wei Wuxian to manipulate it. While these walking corpses have never gone through his training, so they could not withstand his direct control, he had no materials at his disposal to immediately create a device that could ease their fear either, and nothing with which to improvise. As he watched the blazing green flames from the east courtyard gradually die down, an idea suddenly came to mind. Why go out searching to find a cruel and vicious deceased one steeped in extreme hatred? The East Hall already had one. More than one. He darted back to the east courtyard. Lan Shizui's first plan had come to an end, so he devised another. The youths all unsheathed their long swords, planting them in the ground to form a fence of blades. The ghost arm smashed about within the enclosure. It was taking all their energy just to hold the hilts in place and prevent them from being expelled by the force. No one had the time to pay attention to who was going in and out of the hall. Wei Wuxian stepped into the east hall and yanked up the corpses of Madame Mo and Mo Xinyuan. One in each hand. In a low voice, he gave a command. Awake yet? At the sound of his voice, the souls returned. An instant later, Madame Mo and Mo Xinyuan opened their wide eyes and let out a shrill shriek unique to malicious ghosts at the moment of their resurrection. Amidst the high and low shrieks, another corpse crawled to its feet in trepidation, calling out feebly with a voice that could not have been any softer. It was Madame Mo's husband. The cries were loud enough, the hatred plentiful. Wei Wuxian was extremely pleased. Recognize that armor out there? He smiled. Tear it apart, he ordered. The three members of the Mo family were like three blasts of black wind, blowing forth in an instant. The left arm had broken a long sword just as it was about to break out of the pen. Three left armless fierce corpses came lunging at it. Even aside from the fear of disobeying Wei Wuxian's command, these three carried an intense hatred for the creature that had killed them, and they unleashed all their fury upon that ghost arm. The one leading the attack was undoubtedly Madame Mo. Once reanimated, female corpses were often particularly ferocious. Her hair was flying wild, her white eyes crawling with red, and her nails had burst into length exponentially. She was foaming at the mouth, her shrill cries practically raising the roofs. Completely crazed, Mo Xinyuan followed his mother closely, working in concert with her to both tear and bite at the left arm, while his father trailed behind them, filling in the gaps between the other two's attacks. The Lan youths who had been struggling to hang on earlier were all stunned. They had only ever heard of such fights between corpses from sundry books and hearsay. This was the first time they had witnessed such a gory scene, and they gawked, unable to avert their eyes. They only had one thought in their minds: this is so exciting. The three corpses and the one arm were in the throes of battle. Suddenly, Mo Xinyuan shrieked as he dodged. That arm had swiped at his abdomen, and several ropes of his intestines drooped from the tear. Madame Mo snarled incessantly at the sight of this. She pulled her son behind her to shield him while escalating her attacks, her nails slicing through air as sharply as blades made of iron and steel. However, Wei Wuxian could tell she was slowly losing against that arm. Even three freshly dead fierce corpses working together could not subdue this one arm. Wei Wuxian watched the battle closely. He curled his tongue slightly, holding a sharp whistle back between his lips as he hesitated to let it loose. If he whistled, he could evoke greater hatred within the controlled fierce corpses, and that would perhaps turn the tables. However, it would be difficult to ensure no one noticed that he was the instigator. In the span of a second, that hand moved as fast as lightning, ruthless and precise as it snapped Madame Mo's neck. Seeing how the Mo family was being steadily beaten back, Wei Wuxian was just about to let loose the whistle he held under his tongue when right then 2 strums from a guacan sounded in the far distance. The 2 notes were skillfully played, ethereal and clear, carrying with them the tinkling bleakness of wind-swept pines, the collection of demonic evils that were in the middle of the brawl. All froze. The use of the long clan of Guso immediately beamed as if they had been resurrected. Lan Shizui raised a hand to wipe away the blood on his face and then looked up, calling out in delight, "Hongwanjun!" The moment he heard the cry of the sobriquet and the distinct guacan, Wei Wuxian turned to leave. Another strum, this time the note was higher pitched, piercing through the sky like the austere harshness of winter's first approach. The 3 fierce corpses shrank back while covering one ear with their right hands at the same time. However, it was impossible to block out the eradication tone of the long clan of Guso in such a way. They only managed to back up a few steps before there was a faint sound of cracking in their skulls. As for the left arm, after engaging such a ferocious fight, hearing the sound of the strings now made it suddenly drop to the ground. Though its fingers still twitched, the arm was already lying limp and silent. After a short silence, the group of youths couldn't help but erupt into loud cheers. The sound filled with the jubilation of having survived. They had endured a terrifying night, and now that help from the clan had finally arrived, they couldn't have cared less if they were harshly punished later for disgracing the sect with a breach of etiquette. While they waved toward the moon, Lan Shizui suddenly noticed someone missing. He tugged on Lan Jingyi. Where is he? Lan Jingyi was busy being happy and replied, Who? He who? That Mo Gangza. Lan Shizui replied, Huh? Why are you looking for that lunatic? Who knows? Maybe he was scared off getting beaten up by me and ran off somewhere. Lan Shizui knew that Lan Jingyi was unmindful and straightforward, never thinking deeply on things or harboring suspicious. He thought to himself, I'll just wait until Hongwanju is down here, then report to him about the man in the incident. The Mo estate slumbered soundly through whether that piece was real or fake was difficult to tell. Even though there had been a bloody corpse fight in the Mo Manor's east and west courtyards, no one was getting up in the middle of the night to watch it. One had to pick and choose the right spectacle to watch, and a spectacle with such intense screaming was best avoided. Wei Wuxian rapidly destroyed any remaining evidence of the sacrificial ritual array that then ran out the door. Of all people who could have come, it had to be the Lan family. Of all people to come, it just had to be Long Wanji. This was someone with whom he had once crossed paths with and fought. So he retreated in a hurry, anxious to find a steed. As he passed by a courtyard, he noticed a spotted donkey tied next to a large millstone, chewing something in its mouth. It appeared a little surprised when it saw him come dashing over, giving him a side-eye like a person would. The instant Wei Wuxian met its eyes, he was immediately moved by the disdain in its gaze. He went up to it, yanked off its rope, and started dragging it out. The spotted donkey loudly complained. Wei Wuxian cajoled as he dragged, coaxing it in every way possible to moving it along. Stepping out in the lighting of dawn, they clattered onto the main road.